hello, hello. Welcome to the Procurement Games Podcast and Open Conversations, where we pose the question, is the field ever leveled in our favor? Of course, we are talking about procurement and contracting of minority, women, and veteran-owned small businesses deemed to be the underutilized firms in government and private corporation contracting. So, my name is Arlene Pingle, and I am a proud Filipina-American entrepreneur. I lead Mackey Company, a strategic consulting organization focused on procurement supply chain management. We basically help government agencies and private companies design race, ethnic, and gender-conscious contract policies and procedures. More importantly, we help folks like you build capacity, capability, and sustainability. Now, as I mentioned before, this is not a platform to gripe. We are sharing your stories and experiences, but we also want to share how the system works, and more importantly, how to beat it. And if we can find a way to generate solutions that make sense for you, we will do that too. Today, we have another story about the dark side of procurement. We are going to dive into the experiences of a historically marginalized business. With us this morning is Jared Petersen, CEO of Straightforward LLC. How are you doing today, Jared?
Great. How are you, Lynn?
I am doing awesome. I want to thank you for joining me today, Jared, to share your journeys and your experiences. Now, before we get started, I'd like to give folks the lay of the land. I'd like you to talk about, you, then get into what Straightforward actually does. After we get to know you a bit, I want to dive into your successes and the challenges you've faced in procurement. Now, last week on our podcast, we talked about the nuances that makes the dark side of procurement. What we're about to get into is a real-life story of barriers that Jared has experienced. So, Jared, before we dig in, why don't you tell us what inspired you to be an entrepreneur and what got you into the industry?
Yeah, thank you. I'm kind of a serial entrepreneur. I kind of view myself as that. The longest time, I went to tech school. I got an associate's degree. I went after a business setting. I always found myself always trying to improve everybody's processes, see the problems that were going on, and it just was annoying. And I couldn't stay in any one job for very long. I always had to find something new, do something new. And I was always trying to improve other people's businesses. And what I discovered is that really and truly I had more of a drive to create something of my own. I always was coming up with business ideas. I just never could get them off the ground. And so how I got into this industry, Straightforward is a technology services design firm. We tailor digital ecosystems to be ready for connected assets, which is communicating software, and the Internet of Things, which is dumb devices becoming smart. And what we've chosen is that the particular industry we've decided to focus on really is government. And that's because we learned some things about procurement, how we learned through Lynn's classes, that we learned through MnDOT. Even before that, we had learned about how the governments have a preference for working with small and disadvantaged businesses. And so we incorporated ourselves into that whole purchasing flow. And so that's kind of where we ended up creating a business and crafting a model and a method, crafting it, honing it, putting it together through multiple consultations with capacity builders and the like. Went through classes, training, all the training you could get from our supplier, our partners, did all this work in order to get ourselves ready for business, and then started a business and started working at it. That's kind of what our process has been in order to get into the industry.
Oh my gosh, I'm totally going to geek out and tell you that I love that tagline, dumb devices being smart. Genius. I digress. Okay, so tell me, how long has Straightforward been in business?
Yeah, so technically on the books, Straightforward has been a legal entity in the state of Minnesota since 2009. It's gone through a couple iterations. So really with this latest focus has been, came about 4 years ago. We took this focus, and really in the last 3 years, we focused on government contracts.
You know, it's okay that you waited to put things together. And we all know that the ideation stage of a business is just one of those things that you want to make sure is right. It takes a lot to focus and start a new business. And with life happening, it's absolutely understandable. So I'm sure our listeners can relate to why you waited a couple of years before you opened your doors. So with that said, the technology industry, Jared, is so vast. So where is your sweet spot? What are Straightforward's core competencies that describes your business model?
We want to be in the agent model. We tend to want to stay in that area. And what that is that a third-party business such as Straightforward is an independent agent of the supplier who's actually providing the contract or the service. That allows us to be completely agnostic about the supplier we're bringing to the table. It allows us to know about what's going on generally in the industry. And really for our client, it allows us to cut through the crap that goes on out there, where we're able to figure out what's the best for our client when they come to us with their problems, their goals, dreams, and where they're headed. We can say, this is where you want to get it from this supplier. This is where you want to get that from that supplier. You don't want to purchase that from this supplier. And it allows us to really cut through the issues that come about with a supplier who's motivated to only sell you what is making them the most money, or what will keep you locked into them, or whatever the case is. And we find that model to be much more user-friendly for our end users, for our clients. Lately, we've been getting into more of the direct selling, where we're going and we're selling widgets directly to the end clients. And really that comes about from some of the problems we're probably going to discuss later. But that's forced us into a situation where we now have to be prime on large contracts that are a little bit hard for us to stretch and reach. So we have to really work at it.
That actually makes a lot of sense. So tell me, who is in your ecosystem? The players in your field, the competition, the clients?
Target clients of the state of Minnesota. We have a master contract with the state of Minnesota for technology management, technology development. We have basic telephone service that should be coming online here soon, hopefully. I love government for their long sales cycles. They're so comforting. We submitted on servers and storage and virtual infrastructure for the state of Minnesota. We have several NASPO contracts that we're eyeing. We're looking at the master contract level of government of SLED procurement. And that's kind of where we've chosen to put ourselves. And so we're looking at state government, state departments, offices of state. One of our target clients is Metropolitan Council, which is technically a state government department that has their own procurement office. We look at cities, counties, SLED, basically, so education as well. We have our own SPIN, so any schools that are out there that have a problem selecting the right technology in order to fit their budgets, fit their business models and what they got going on. We have a SPIN.
Well, broadband is a big thing for schools nowadays, so that's definitely right up your alley, right?
Exactly, and then we even have a plan that's coming together for rural broadband coming out we're positioning ourselves to be ready for the rural broadband infrastructure investment. One that has a competitive business model attached to it that really returns some of the power that the technology companies have over the top of their user model, to return some of that power back to the people that has lost it. So look for some more information soon about that. But that's kind of where we're headed.
I love it. I love it. Every time I hear you speak, it makes so much sense to me as to why there are barriers in the technology industry. And you mentioned a few things in there, and we're going to address that a little later. But who else on your field do you consider your competition?
Yeah, so our competition would be somebody like a CDW or a Insight Public Sector or Matrix Communications here locally in the Twin Cities area, or somebody like that. We aspire to be as great one day as these companies that are strongly entrenched and have really strong ties with the buyers that they do business with.
I love that you consider these big guys your competition, because it really reinforces the fact that even though you are a small business, you've got capacity and capability to be in that same field. And to me, that's that's the best thing. I want to go back to and forget that you talked about goals a little earlier, and we're just not there yet to talk about that. I want to kind of do one last question about your organization, and that is, how has Straightforward actually ensured the participation of minority, women, veteran-owned small businesses in some of their pursuits?
We are small. We're super small. As a company, Straightforward is two people: myself, CEO, my wife, who's CFO, and that's it as far as the size of the actual company goes. And we find that to be that's laughable to some of these organizations, that with two-person team can handle this type of work. And the reason we're able to handle that is because of the large distribution channel that we have behind us. We have several distributors who help us meet the needs, not only of the large corporations to be able to fill in some of the gaps that we have, but that also allows us to take that same distribution channel and apply it to other small and disadvantaged businesses. So instead of hiring on employees to our company and making us larger and having to manage people, what we want is other driven people who are invested in their own businesses and want to grow them themselves. And what we've done is we've aligned ourselves with those other small businesses, handed them our channel, and said, here, these are the RFPs to go after, and said, here's everything you need in order to be successful at doing that. And so when you think about us as being a small, tiny little company, we really have hundreds and hundreds of other partners that we can go after and say, hey, here, go after this and meet the goal along with this large supplier, and do a matchmaking alongside of them. And then meet that procurement officer's goal, or that entity's goal of what they need. Because the issue comes up over and over and over again. Why in the world would I buy from a tiny little supplier when I need these compliancies? I get it. Why in the world would I buy from this tiny little supplier when I need this type of reliability? I need 5 nines and they're unproven. Well, they need that. The government entities need those things. Well, you can also still meet those small and disadvantaged business goals by handing a tiny little supplier a little chunk of everything that goes on, and then marry all of the compliancies on top of it, all of the reliability questions, all of the engineering things on top of it. And really what you're doing is putting a relationship piece in that the small and disadvantaged business can handle without having to take on any risk at all, really any risk at all, in any way.
Now, Jared, it sounds like you're serving as a general contractor for the technology industry. And if you think about it, you're paying attention to the goals, just like a general contractor or a prime, as they are called. Not really a fan of that word. Basically connecting subcontractors of technology to the scopes of work that the project needs, and you're managing the process. Now, am I wrong in making that assumption?
I love that you brought that up. I've heard you say that before to me, and I never really got it, because I have a little bit of background in construction. I did a little bit of HVAC work back in the day. I did building automation systems and the like. So I know what the general contractor is, but that wasn't necessarily my chosen field. What I chose was the technology portion of things. And when we go and we bring in small businesses to become the agent of the large contractors, we're bringing in that large supplier who goes alongside of that small business. And then that agent, that small business that we bring in, they're now managing that project, an added layer, a customer advocate layer for the entity that doesn't exist right now from the suppliers. They have one, but it's not really on the customer focused side. It's more on how the business can land and expand within the entity that they're making inroads with. And so instead of having that entity supplier project manager, now you have your own supplier manager who's managing everything from the procurement side of things to the implementation, the project management. And then when that contract is in place, now you have somebody who's there and invested inside of your organization, who's really wanting to make sure that that supplier or any suppliers that they bring to you are doing what they're supposed to be doing. And they have a channel all the way up to the top to knock heads and make sure that the supplier is performing for you correctly.
I'm telling you, this IT industry is a vast topic of podcast in and of itself. One of the things that we haven't even talked about is pass-through, and how that is such a prevalent issue that government agencies fail to recognize in the IT industry, and we just don't have time to talk about that today. So we're going to definitely save that for another podcast. And Jared, I really, really appreciate the overview of what Straightforward is about. And by all means, for our listeners out there, if you are looking for someone to handle your IT needs, we now have a small minority-owned IT general contractor who can do this work for you. Jared's information is on our website, procurementgames.org. Please connect with him and see how you guys can work together. All right, let me shift a bit here and let's talk about what's going on in the support system. What does support actually mean? What does advocacy actually mean? You know, a lot of us can define that a million different ways based on the services that we've received from government agencies, private corporations, and even our nonprofit agencies. But what I want to talk about today, and really, really want to roll up our sleeves, last segment that we have, is to really understand how effective these organizations are. Are they really helping us? What are they doing to helping us? If you were to give them a grade, Jared, what would it be? And kind of just elaborate a little bit on perhaps a personal story of yours that, you know, took you through that journey of supporting services.
I'll say that the marketing of how much help government agencies provide to small businesses sounds really good. Hey, you start up a business. This is where you start. Go through here. You need some help starting your business. Here's the process. Here is some help. If you have a business idea you want to develop, go see these guys. What we found is that the process is incredibly disjointed. You know, we had an idea even before this that my wife and I started trying to pitch. We go and we bring it to some government advocate. I won't name them necessarily, but you know, we bring it to them, and then not even 2 years later, the same idea comes out. But these people are industry executives that we're talking to, you know, and all of a sudden,
an idea or two, Jared.
all of a sudden that idea appears in the mainstream. Can't say that those things actually happened or not, that somebody, I can't point to it, but it feels like it. It definitely feels like it. I can't say that they stole the idea, but you know what? At the time it was, well, it now discouraged me completely from wanting to, it really hurts because it's like, well, this is a very complicated idea we've been working on for 3 years. We knew the risk was there, but then all of a sudden somebody has the cash and capital in order to get that done. So that's the scary part, is having industry executives listening to ideas of small and disadvantaged businesses and then not really providing, here, just go see this person, just go see this person, just go see this person. And there's no real accountability of how well that's what I found, is there's no accountability of how well they're actually performing, uplifting these businesses. But these ideas tend to leak out and make it to mainstream.
You know, I call that the pillaging for the sake of innovation, Jared. Because that's exactly what it is they're more than willing to take your ideas, not give you the contract, and whoever's won the contract, pass that idea on to see if it can be executed by them.
Yeah. And that speaks to exactly. And we were just doing some research for this broadband idea at the highest level of government in the United States. But they're concerned about consolidation, being about how it really is bad for business to have large companies always have the idea, and the consolidation is bad for the consumer. And that's what's also worrying about how much government agencies tend to listen to industry executives about applying programs to the small and minority businesses, but not really listening to what the minority business or the small and businesses have to say.
Now, I do want to give a platform for a positive experience that you may have that helped you along the way, because there had to have been someone advocating for you. Tell me about that.
MnDOT has a pretty good program, has had pretty good programs in the past. It wasn't until we found really you, Lynn, at the Small Business Resource Center that put us where we were able to hone everything that we wanted to do into a pitch, where we were able to take our financials and hone it into something that was usable. And now we actually had a little bit to go after and go, how do we position ourselves in a way that's ready for government contracting? And how can we speak to what their issues are? Because I have no clue. They won't talk to me. Buyers don't talk to me. They don't tell me how to work through their processes.
No. You're absolutely correct, because how can you possibly know their processes, right? And that's the challenge, is sometimes we don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and it doesn't really give us that open, fair transparency for contracting. And I'm sure your story resounded or resonated with others listening to this podcast, because they have perhaps taken advantage of these supportive services and perhaps experienced where it did not work for them. And we need to fix that. We need to figure out how they can do better. And that's really what this is about.
We find that there's a little bit of help in PTAC over there, but we find that it allows us administratively to find out information throughout the process. But it's not really a, how do I take my business from being absolute nothing to being, how do I get my name out there? There's some of that. There's quite a bit of that. We like the PTAC people a lot. We sit down and talk with them every once in a while. But it find is that by having disjointed processes through multiple levels of government, the PTAC in your area is going to be able to help you with the PTAC issues in your area, whether that's in Minnesota or if that's in Oregon. They're not really to help you in Oregon with Oregon issues. But you know what? As a technology service provider, it doesn't matter that I'm in Oregon or in Minnesota or in New York. They all exist in 50 states, but they don't know the issues going on in somebody else's jurisdiction. By having disjointed processes, it doesn't help the small business navigate where they're headed. It's kind of all these silos and these issues that just aren't being handled smoothly for the business, because it takes a ton of time and effort to go through certifications, to go through training, to get to the point where you had an idea and you're just trying to get things moving, and you have limited funds and you have limited time because you're wearing 50 different hats, and to end up down a road where you're going, oh, well, now somebody's pilfering my idea. PTAC didn't do that. Don't get me wrong. I used the name there and it was not PTAC. So, but it wasn't a PTAC situation. It was another government help situation completely. So it wasn't PTAC at all. But to have that situation happen just really takes the sales out of your success when you're trying to move your business forward.
Honestly, sometimes it just sucks for us. It's difficult for us not to name names in this ecosystem. We fear retaliation. We fear getting blacklisted, when all we're really trying to do is help them deliver what they committed to, which is to level that playing field. It's amazing that we're having to jump through these hoops. Oh, don't get me started. So I really love this, because you really allow me to set up the segue for our next topic. Okay, so Jared, you shared your thoughts on how the ecosystem has failed to continue to help you. Now, I want to look at this at a macro level. What about the industry itself? What's not working? Why aren't there that many minority, women, and veteran-owned small technology firms?
I would point to several studies. Won't be able to pull them out right now about which ones you could find, but there are numerous ones. You could look up a ton about the lack of diversity in technology. There's virtually none. I can think of several organizations working very hard to increase diversity internally as employees, and then also externally for contracting. And the reason that exists is because there's a real problem.
But come on, Jared. We know that there's several countries like China and India that are much more advanced than the US as it relates to technology. We also know that we have citizens from these countries and many others who can represent the technology industry. So what gives? Are you saying that the industry is not welcoming?
One of the glitches is that the barrier to business is high. If you come up with any technology idea, you are no longer small by the time it becomes something that a government entity is really interested in. And that's me speaking government procurement. Really and truly, if you come up with an idea, you have to pitch it to angel investors. There's a whole host of issues that come in. What happens is that the small disadvantaged business really and truly cannot overcome the income barrier in general. That's one of the issues. The compliancy issues that go along with producing technology solutions are all big, huge threats to a small disadvantaged business. Not only that, by the time you hit, if you're talking about government procurement, by the time you hit a level that is suitable to them for their risk and their adversity to risk, then you're hitting a level of procurement that is really and truly, you're no longer small. You're no longer disadvantaged. Let's put it that way. You can be a small supplier, a small internet provider, ISP, remotely or whatever, and you can sell to the government because you're the only one in that area, because you're the only one in that rural town or that rural area. But really and truly, you're not a disadvantaged business at that point. The income levels are too high.
So if the industry just looked at the services they provide to agencies and corporations, they could carve out that lower tier space and there's still plenty of money to go around. But you're saying that the industry, agencies, and these corporations are not recognizing this lower tier despite their claim to, quote, remove barriers for small and underutilized business?
It doesn't matter to them. And honestly, Lynn, I'd have said, probably if we had this conversation last week, I'd have said the biggest problem is that government doesn't recognize this tier that's there. But really and truly, what I see is that the industry doesn't care about that tier being there.
Wait a minute. The IT industry is like $1 billion industry, right? And you have a small segment, this lower tier that you're talking about, the minority, women, and veteran small businesses that have the capability and can get tapped into. Like, let me put you on the spot here. Like, what percentage is that exactly?
On average, we're talking at least 10% of all of the procurement dollars that are spent on internet access, on cloud technology, on security and access, and all of those dollars, you're talking at least 10%. A lot of times you can hit the 12, 14, sometimes even 20%. They don't tend to even step up to fight for that small business as part of that advantage and a part of that advantage in the procurement process. Most of the time, they don't understand the procurement process themselves. Really, they view the business as something they would like to go after. But once the rubber meets the road about making sure that they back that small and disadvantaged business, they'll back off and they won't support that small and disadvantaged business all the way through into the full end of it. And I think you can probably lead me in those conversations of where you'd like me to go.
Yeah. What he's talking about there, folks, is how these, quote, big guys can actually defend us and help us fight this battle with government agencies who may not understand or who don't really understand the IT industry. Therefore, they may not be aware of the barriers they're creating. You know, that's really going to be another podcast for us to dive into. Okay, so we dove into the industry, right? Let's shift our focus to the government agencies. And what are the barriers that you've faced having to deal with their procurement processes?
We've tried coming in as an agent model. We've tried coming in as a direct supplier. We've tried coming in we've won competitively. We've lost competitively. We've lost through fraud. We've lost through straight up incompetence. We've lost through all kinds of situations. And what I find is that when you call out procurement departments on they're not meeting their commitments, they go into defensive mode instead of we're sorry mode. Let's fix this, or we'll get them. We'll work on another one down the road. Yeah, we got plenty of opportunities coming up. Well, guess what? You just awarded me a contract verbally, and then you went and you said, no, we're not going to actually go through with it and cancel it. That's demoralizing. Or you went and we asked you for put a goal on this project, and you completely ignored me. Pre-solicit or in a solicitation phase protest, and then we complained about it in a award phase protest on another one, and you completely ignore all of them. But you want to say, well, there's plenty of opportunities coming up. How in the world would I trust you? And I got to say that one that we had like that, where we've had 3 losses in a row, where we've won one competitively and then they cancel it. We then complain about it in a award phase protest, and then we about another contract, and then we complain about another contract in the solicitation phase protest. They actually had a meeting with us, and they are actually using our language because we educated them about their goals, about where they could find the goals, and now their stuff's coming out with goals where we told them there were goals to find, and that was encouraging. I still haven't gotten any money from it.
It pains me still because I traveled that protest journey with you, and to hear that there's still no resolution to this date, it's a deflating thing, that is for sure. This is why these big guys have got to lean in and help us change the system. It's the only way that minority, women, and veteran-owned tech companies could possibly survive. And really, it's not just the tech companies, it's other industries that we haven't even glazed over. So I really, really think that a podcast on that is gonna be in the future. So let me turn this around. And while we've looked at the industry and we've looked at the government and the barriers they've created, now I gotta look at you because you're that other player in the field. I think it's only fair that we see what you have done to make sure that you are also improving the system. What have you done to influence it? How have you helped yourself to make sure that you prevail in this convoluted process?
Missteps that we've made as a business, and that's the learning curve that we have, and it's a important burden for us to acknowledge, because when we sit down and we look at some of these things, and some of the things that we've talked about are crazy situations that I cannot believe that these things have ever happened. But when we look at ourselves and we look at how we do things, there's no excuse for missing date, right? So we've incorporated that into our process. In our ERP model, we have all the dates listed so that we don't miss them. When we go and we all of the RFP over, we go when we, the way our agnostic approach goes when we're doing RFPs, we read that over before we send it out to our vendor community. Master contracts, those are ones we watch heavily for what's coming up. It's up to me to ask for that face-to-face. It's up to the government agency to make that person available so that we can carve out the right situation.
I just gotta commend you, Jared, because hearing your story, wow. You have definitely gone through some things, and the fact that you took the time to understand the system and learn to work it is amazing in and of itself. And that's what I would want all of our listeners to do. Learn the system. So let me share some final thoughts with you, Jared. I would really encourage you to build a relationship with the big guys in your industry and become a resource to them and a solutions provider beyond anything that they've ever known. I'd also say that you should establish a rapport with the DEI managers and get on their radar. I'm not saying that you haven't. I'm simply saying shift a little bit on making sure that they really know and understand what it is that you do. I also like the fact that you've got a look-ahead schedule so you know what projects are in front of you. So keep doing that. And finally, there is a Data Practice Act where you can request all of this information post the award and contract signing, because I think that'll help elevate and help you understand where and how you can improve yourself. And with that, I want to thank our special guests for sharing their thoughts and experiences with us. I have certainly learned more about this industry and how the procurement game is played in it. I am sure that there are those of you listening to this podcast whose jaws dropped, are shaking your heads, and can totally relate. So I encourage you to share your own story and contact us at procurementgames.org. Next week, we look at another historically marginalized business and how a promising opportunity ended up becoming a deflating lesson that created a barrier for their business. And to you, our listeners, thanks for tuning in. And remember, don't just go after the low-hanging fruit. Look up and see the rest of the tree filled with fruits getting ready to ripen. Strive for that, my friends, and strategize for the win. Until next time.